All right, let's take a moment to refresh our communal memories. I'm going to switch back to fussyguides.ai, found inside the O4 line art folder, of course. And you'll see that this heart is filled with a target. And notice, by the way, that the target clips right along that beveled stroke, thereby eliminating any concern about it. And we're going to draw this target as a series of concentric rings using the Polar Grid tool. So let's switch back to our project at hand. I've saved my progress as classicheart.ai. And I'm going to press Control semicolon or Command semicolon on the Mac to bring up my guides once again. And I'll click and hold on the Arc tool, which is the last line tool I used. And I'll now switch to the Polar Grid tool. And what I want you to do is drag from the center outward, like so. This is the center of the illustration out, in order to create something that doesn't look like a target at all because it has those pie wedges in it. And also, it's not going to appear inside the heart the way I'm drawing it, but that's because I'm drawing it from corner to corner. Well, the thing you might notice about circular objects is they don't have corners. So instead, I'm fitting this item into a rectangular bounding box. What I'd prefer to do is draw it from the center outward, and I can do that on the fly as I'm dragging with the tool by pressing the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac. And I'll also press, by the way, the Shift key to constrain the proportions so it's absolutely circular. So I have both the Shift and Alt keys down here on the PC, the Shift and Option keys down on the Mac. Make sure to keep them down because if you release, for example, the Alt or Option key, you're going to go back to the corner-to-corner metaphor here, and we definitely don't want that. So press and hold Alt and Shift or Option and Shift the entire time you're dragging. Now then, the other stuff with Shift and Alt down, it's difficult to play with the arrow tools, which is what we need to do at this point. And the arrow tools allow us to get rid of the pie wedges and add some concentric rings if we need to. And what I'd have to do, really, in order to pull this off, I'm not an octopus. So I'd have to go ahead and release Shift and Alt or Shift and Option for a moment, and then just keep my cursor where it is. And I've got my mouse button down, by the way, the entire time. My finger's growing a little tired, but it is pressed. Notice if I press the up arrow key, I'll add concentric rings. If I press the down arrow key, I'll get rid of rings. And if I press the right arrow key, I'll add pie wedges. And if I press the left arrow key, I'll get rid of pie wedges. Well, I want no pie wedges, so I'm going to keep pressing the left arrow key until I have none left. And then, at this point, I believe I want one more concentric ring, so I'll press the up arrow key. But it's a little difficult to track. One concentric ring rather blurs into another. So what I recommend you do is try to get it as close as possible, something along these lines. And then press and hold the Shift and Alt keys at the same time while you still have that mouse button down, or the Shift and Option keys on the Mac, and having gotten the shape about this big, notice that that outermost ring completely encloses the heart with a little room to spare. Then go ahead and release your mouse button, and then release the Shift and Alt keys. Now, of course, that looks awful. I'll be the first to admit it. But the reason it looks so awful is we have yet to assign the right fill and stroke attributes. So I'm going to go up to the stroke option in the control panel, and I'm going to change that weight value from 10 point to 4 point, like so. And now things are starting to look better. And I also want to go ahead and fill these rings with red. And I can do that by clicking this item right here. And that brings up my swatches palette. And this first icon, by the way, controls the color of the fill. The second icon controls the color of the stroke. And I'll select CMYK red. And that will go ahead and fill the entire thing with red. That's not what I want at all. All right, so that's interesting. What I need to do is go ahead and redraw this object. So I'll press the backspace key or the delete key on the Mac to get rid of what I've drawn. Now, that might seem like a rather excessive solution to just go ahead and throw away everything that we've done so far, but we can recreate it in record time. Using, once again, the Polar Grid tool. I will move my cursor to the center location, and this happens to be the exact center of the artboard. Notice that. And once I get my cursor exactly aligned to those guides, I'll press and hold the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and click. And the reason I'm Alt-clicking this time, or Option-clicking, is not to bring up the dialog box. I realize Illustrator tends to be a little bit confusing. And by a little bit confusing, I mean enormously confusing when you first start using it. But the fact that I clicked with this tool causes it to bring up this dialog box that allows you to enter some values. However, if you were to just click, you would draw your rings from corner to corner, and we don't want to do that. And notice we would draw from the upper left corner because this upper left point is selected inside of this little square. That's not what we want. We want to draw from the center outward, so that's why I Alt-clicked or Option-clicked with the tool. All right, we don't need to change the default size because it's already tracking the size of the last thing we drew. So 522 points in my case turns out to be exactly what I want. Your case, it might be slightly different. Don't worry about it. Concentric dividers are the rings, and their number should be set to 6. So if you have some other number, change it. You can also skew the rings inward and outward if you want to. Please don't. Leave that skew value set to 0%. Your radial dividers are your pi wedges. We want that number to be set to 0. Also leave that skew value set to 0%, although it doesn't matter, I have to say, because we have 0 of these things. We'd have to have at least 2 for the skew to matter. And then I want to drop down here and say create compound paths from ellipses. And I could also go ahead and say fill grid, which should go ahead and apply the last fill attribute I assigned, which is red. So let's try it out here. Both checkboxes on, whatever values appear, 6 for concentric dividers and 0 for skew. Click OK, and we get exactly what I wanted. That looks absolutely brilliant. The one problem is that it's not inside the heart. It needs to be inside the heart. We will put it inside the heart in the very next exercise.